Who are you, Jeff?
Look like it's gonna work okay today. So a lot of folks online. Realized it's fall break, a lot of schools.
close together. Road shots having 5G transmitters.
That's not conspiracy theory.
You're right, it's fact. Yeah. That's a point I would like to argue next semester, that it is indeed fact. That would be fun.
My plan right now is to have like 3 where I'm.
Recording in progress.
If you're online, please mute yourself.
Okay, I'm pleased to call this October meeting of the Faculty Senate to order. Thank you all for being here. First item of business is to note that the Senate meetings for September have been approved electronically. Thank you for that. And I know you just walked in, but we're going to turn the time over to our administrators for their reports.
Thank you. I hope all of you are well. We're going to do this a little bit differently, if that's all right with you. I know there are a number of operational questions that are probably best answered by the provost, so I'm going to yield more time to him. But I wanted to share with you a couple of data points that I'm going to send out to the entire university on Monday. But I'm giving you the sneak preview because I think every single person in this room, everybody online, and every single person who works for this university helped to produce the results that I'm about to share. This year, we get to celebrate officially, because now we are at census, and technically the USG has to confirm all of our results. So these are just official for us, but I'm not sure our math is going to change much. But overall, we experienced a 7.2% increase in enrollment. I'm going to break down some of the key areas there. One, our undergraduate enrollment decreased by 2.68%. I also think everybody needs to know that that's in America right now. That's a win, because it wasn't down 6 or 8. We stemmed the tide of a decreasing number over the course of 6 years in a way that is very, very meaningful for the future. Graduate enrollment went up 33.72% year over year. That is a powerful number and just continues to reinforce the fact that UWG is moving toward being 30% graduate students. Our adjusted total credit hours, and I referenced this in my university address earlier in the semester, but for the first time since 2016, we have booked a year-over-year student credit hour increase, which is where the rubber meets the road in the economy of the University of West Georgia. That matters a lot. And finally, and I think most importantly, we have, I referenced it as a soft result in the university address, but we have the highest first to second year retention rate, which is the retention rate that the federal government tracks, state government tracks. That's the retention. We have the highest since that metric started being recorded at the University of West Georgia, with 75.98%. And we set the goal 3.5 years ago of at least hitting the national average. At that time, we were 8 points below the national average, and now, or 10 points below the national average. And now we have exceeded that standard and can reset our perspective toward an 80% retention rate. That's the most critical one from my vantage point, because we stemmed fall to spring retention losses last year. Normally, we would have lost maybe 10% of students, somewhere between 10 and 12. Last year, we had it at about 3% for the first time in as long as we have records. And that mattered a lot. But to have such a dramatic increase in first to second year retention, that is a key indicator that those students who have plenty of options in the marketplace have chosen that this is the place they want to be because of the experiences that we are offering and the support that we are offering. And that matters a lot. Everybody should walk away from those statistics feeling like we're doing the right work. It's not perfect, but we're doing the right work, moving in the right direction, and it shows in the way that students are deciding to choose the University of West Georgia. So I say to everybody, congratulations on those results. Really exceptional. Lots of work to do moving forward, but man, it is nice to be encouraged by positive results and the positive inputs of students. With that, I'll save answering any question anybody has until after the provost has provided some things, just for the sake of efficiency, if that's all right.
Thank you, President. Good afternoon, everybody. Hope you're having a good Friday and enjoying some cooler weather here. I think fall is finally upon us. So I've got a couple of comments, and I appreciate Dr. Weber giving me some heads up on some questions that you all have passed to him. I think that process is working really well, so that as you all have items that are coming up, please continue to share those with the Faculty Senate Executive Committee, and then Dr. Weber's passing those on so that we can address concerns and things that are top of mind for you. So a couple of my comments are really centered around some of those things that we're really working on and leaning into across academic affairs. The first is, I'm going to echo the president's comments about growth in credit hour and enrollment. My congratulations and appreciation and kudos to all of the faculty for enabling this. We've got a preview day tomorrow, and I know a number of you all are active in promoting your programs and really helping tell that story about why students should come to West Georgia and study in your academic areas. As we do that more and more, a number of years ago, we shifted from listing courses and course numbers into really talking about students while they're here and after they graduate as alum, what they're able to accomplish across our academic programs. And that is really bearing some great fruit. People are seeing themselves and saying, I'd like to go and do something like that. And if you still have some sheets that you're putting out, academic program maps, maybe put that as the second piece that you put in people's hands. Lean in on those stories. And I commend you for the accomplishments and the growth that you're achieving, as well as continuing to really lean in on those unique experiences. I'm going to give you a brief update from a SAC-COC perspective. We have submitted and we're now awaiting that off-campus review. If you want to pencil in, April 1st through 4th will be following right after Easter, and I think that is a spring break week, correct me, in spring of 24, but that will be when we have our on-site visit. People coming in and really doing a deep dive based on that off-site review. This is our opportunity to answer any questions, to really show that West Georgia is meeting those SAC-COC standards really well. I think our self-study that we submitted addresses all of those standards. And furthermore, on that on-site, we'll be really leaning into our QEP. Now, I raise that not only to kind of give you a heads up and to pencil that on your calendar, but that experiential learning and preparing people for their careers, not just jobs, but really careers long-term, helping them answer that question when they're being interviewed for that first job. Tell me about a project that you worked on in your studies, and tell me about something that you've done in substance, why we should hire you. We're leaning in on that and really addressing that proactively, creating spaces in the first year, second, third, fourth, and for those that stick around a little bit longer, fifth and sixth, but really giving them every semester. It's not just one experience before they graduate, but every single semester in a myriad of different ways, they're able to really talk about, I participated in this student activity, I engaged in this civic organization, I applied what I was learning in class in an internship. We had a company that provided an R&D exercise in my senior capstone that we were able to do. And so appreciate all of you that are working on that. And for those that aren't yet, you'll be grafted in even more in detail in that spring semester. We'll present that to that SAC-COC visiting team. I think we're very well positioned and look forward to December of 2024 when that official annual meeting of SAC-COC officially votes on our reaffirmation of accreditation. Connected with those experiential opportunities, last week, had a couple of faculty join at a COETA chamber event for a battery and EV company in COETA that's opening up Frere. And connected chemistry and physics to this because it really talks about and leans into the governor's expectation that Georgia will be the national center for battery and EV production in the nation. I think West Georgia and our faculty across, not just in natural sciences, but really broadly, has an opportunity to contribute to that. And what Frere as a company is doing and expanding is really impressive. We had a presentation, Batteries 101, so I'd love to talk with you offline about what that looks like. And for everybody who goes home and turns on the air conditioning, maybe not today, we might be getting the heat next week, but generating or consuming more energy at 6 p.m. as we're preparing dinner and so forth. A lot of the solar and other production of energy is midday. And Frere is a really interesting company that allows us to take that power that's generated midday and then utilize it later. So really inventive thinking and connecting faculty and showing what West Georgia can do to meet that workforce need. The senior vice president that was presenting at Frere said their number one challenge is getting the right talent, getting the right people. And that's our business, not just for EV and battery, but for all of our academic programs. I think we do that exceedingly well, and the QEP really will be enhancing that. Connected to that, I know one of the questions that came up was what problem is, as we're looking at, and this is on the agenda today, the block scheduling and changing how we schedule classes. I'm looking forward to that discussion as part of the agenda for Faculty Senate today. And if we've got specific questions, I know Dr. Akins can walk us through the process of engaging students, engaging faculty, engaging others across the institution. When does the survey close down, Melissa?
Next Friday.
Okay, so we've still got another week for you all to provide input on what are the gotchas that you see in this draft. And we presented this as an information item a month ago at Faculty Senate, still asking for your input on where does this break, where does it not work? So nursing was a great example of providing that input and saying, well, the way we structure, we need to be able to do things in a slightly different way. As you see opportunity to do that, I hope that that's part of the discussion today, as well as your input across the next week. I had a great conversation with Dr. Reber this morning about this is, if we move in this direction and we simplify as students, or what we're hearing from students is we need to simplify and make this easier. So I'll say that that's really the problem we're trying to solve. When a student's trying to schedule an English 1101 and a chem course, and there's a 20-minute overlap, that's a problem. Now, sometimes that's just going to happen based on when courses are scheduled, but if we can minimize that chance, then it's going to help students get the classes they need, graduate sooner, get out there and work for great companies and launch their careers. So to the question of what problem are we trying to solve, we have way too many start times and too much overlap between classes that are just unnecessary. We can improve the utilization of our resources. The system office is going to be very pleased when we don't have blank spaces throughout our calendar. And we're going to be able to ultimately move students through and help them to graduation quicker. So I look forward to diving deeper in that. And this is not a one and done, come November 1st, we're not done with this conversation. We will continue to revisit and evolve this as time goes on. Another item that came up is the annual evaluation worksheet that I know that deans have been sharing with you. This does not change the, I think I shared an e-copy of this as part of the agenda last time. This does not change our process of doing annual evaluation. But the system office is asking us as part of this, their need to see the data around teaching, scholarship, service, and student success. We are required to be submitting these high-level 1 through 5 numbers. So this gives us an opportunity to simplify department chairs being able to work with faculty and clearly talking about what were the expectations and your goals for this past year, how did you meet them, and what are the upcoming goals? I think I shared last month at Faculty Senate, one of the best things that happened to me in my earlier career as faculty was I would be targeting a conference or a presentation, a publication, and I would do all the work and I would get it accepted and I would go to the chair and they would say, budget's tight, can't go. It would have been better for me to know that before I did all that work. And then take that as personal funds to make sure I could attend that conference. Better will be for us to negotiate among faculty and chairs before you do that work and say, in the upcoming year, I'm targeting this conference and this journal and so forth. And the chair pencils in and says, absolutely, that's a commendable goal. That's going to move our program forward, our department forward. And then pencil that budget in so that you've agreed to this work. And when you get that yes and acceptance, that you've got the money to go and attend and present that, and you're not having to pull that out of your personal funds. We can proactively plan. And so this cover sheet doesn't change our criteria or the way in which faculty are working. But what it does do is it maps your past goals that you've accomplished, and you can demonstrate achievement there, as well as projecting in the upcoming year what you're looking to do. So I welcome continued input on this. And you'll also note the last piece of it provides faculty an opportunity to put input. If you and the chair disagree with your evaluation, it provides faculty an opportunity to provide that comment before it goes to the dean and so on. It encodes that as a formal mechanism. Had some questions about the formation of the new college and school, and you saw that announcement in the AA newsletter on Monday. I want to say we had a great 2 meetings this morning, kind of charge meetings for those different groups. And I'm really looking forward to the work that they're going to be producing. But the specific charge was that they are not a closed group. They are not deciding the future of these areas at West Georgia. Their charge is to host and really solicit feedback through discovery sessions and information sessions with all faculty and staff and students and our external partners in industry, and hear what should we be doing in math, in computing, in science, in mental health and wellness. And they're intentionally designed to be a small group so that they can operate and meet efficiently. But please know that the entire institution, all faculty are invited to contribute your perspectives. So if you don't see your specific department or your specific academic area represented on that, understand it's a tight group, but that you absolutely have something to say there. We're really looking for creative ways of getting the intersection of disciplines to address these big problems in these areas. And one example that I shared this morning to both groups was one of the most influential faculty members in my studies in computer science had their PhD in psychology. They brought a perspective of technology as an extension of what we can do as humans. And that's all a computer is. It's just a super fast 1 and 0 counting machine, right? But they brought that psychology perspective in, and I would not have had that really deep, rich understanding of human factors and in systems design without that input from psychology. So I give that as a way of example for psychology and computer science being married. In the same way that in each of these, whether it's the college or the school that we're looking at, there's an opportunity for everybody to bring their piece to the table and say, well, have you considered this? And let's make sure that this is incorporated. The goal isn't necessarily to set up structure and to define departments. We'll get to that. But the first charge is let's think big. What will we as an institution be able to do in these spaces in the next 3, 5, 10 years? And so what you'll see in the discovery sessions is we will have time to discuss and debate these items throughout this calendar year. And then work early in spring semester to talk then about the tactical elements that need to be in place and the administrative structures to enable those goals. But let's start with that big, bold, strategic thinking, and then talk about what ingredients. The analogy I made this morning is we decide that we're going to make a cake, and I apologize for folks who haven't had lunch yet. It might be Monday. We're going to make a cake, and then we talk about the ingredients necessary to pull it off. Let's take that approach, and so that's the charge to these groups. I'll also add that I'm going to put 10 fingers pointing back to myself. We had a miss. I had a miss. In that, as we form this College of Math, Computing, and Science, appropriately, questions from arts and humanities has come up about now that we shift in CAXI, what does this do for those academic disciplines in CAXI that are not necessarily in the new College of Math, Computing, and Science? So apologies for that. It is not our intent to forget and to neglect. So what you will see is another working group coming together, specifically focused around arts and humanities, around what does that look like going forward. So look for new information coming out next week about that. And if you have thoughts, same idea. It's broad, inclusive. We want everybody to be able to provide their input into that. These are incredibly valuable areas, and the example that I mentioned this morning, and I've said for a number of years, without the beauty and the art married with the science, we would never have these wonderful Apple products and other devices that we have. We've got that human factors, we've got that design, we've got that artistic element that comes into play. So very, very important areas of the institution, as well as to the academic programs that will be. I'm sure there are other questions. I think workload is going to be part of the discussion today, clarifying the 4-4 versus the 80% 10-10. So look forward to that discussion. But with that, happy to take any questions. I think the President and I will dive deep into any other area that people have questions about.
Please, questions for our administrators, and thank you for your reports.
Yes.
I'm glad that within course, there will be a committee that will post and solicit feedback, end of course. I would like to think big, really big, huge, humongous. One of the factors that goes into thinking big is having some idea of the dollar amount that might be available. It would be very helpful for dreamers to have an idea as to whether is it a new building or a fraction of a building, will there be room for instrumentation? And yes, absolutely, I have a vested interest mentioned batteries. We want West Georgia to be the battery capital of the UWG.
Yes.
And I have one colleague sitting, Martin McPhail, who's an expert on electrochemistry and things of that nature. But I pose the question this way: can you please share some dollar amounts and some parameters as we start thinking?
Great question, and I want to jump in on that, please. One, I love the battery capital of the USD. I'm absolutely going to steal that. I don't want to make that finite. You're unleashing resources, so obviously we have a large gift that's going to come in the form of some physical assets, which will come second. But there will be dollars to support work for years and years to come, right? So, and that's the important part. We build wealth at universities through endowments that produce dollars every year in perpetuity. And that's the unique opportunity for this college. I can't give you a specific dollar amount on that because I have to go and check. I mean, it doesn't really matter. The only thing that matters is what types of dollars will come in on an annual basis. In the same moment, anytime you morph the way the university is organized, that's where the big dollars are. We're about a $234 million a year university right now. Some of that is baked in for how those dollars are used. They all have to benefit students in the state of Georgia. That being said, there are some areas that have more intense resource requirements. You and I represent different areas from an academic perspective. I can tell you political communication is not that expensive, right? I mean, it really is. It's data sources, it's some light software, and then just intellectual capital. I don't have to ever use a microscope except to look cool. So you would, that is a dedication of resources that where there's a base, right? But let's go back to the battery capital of Georgia. See if we adopt a mission or a vision that aligns with a goal of the state, we open ourselves up to the types of resources that other universities have. All of a sudden, the state wants to make special investments in us. We have a good example of that in nursing. We've grown our nursing program over the last couple of years, and for those of you who were part of that, thank you for that. The state made a special investment of $1 million into the University of West Georgia after we had already made that decision. Now, that is not money that we were entitled to. It didn't come from tuition. It wasn't on our books at all, but the state recognized that we were solving a problem for them and said, we want to make sure you have some additional resources here. I wish it was $1 billion and I wish it was in perpetuity, but we got those types of resources. So if we get involved in being a solution on the battery front, then we have industrial dollars that myself and a few others get to go after in partnership with those companies. We have lots of universities in the state of Georgia. We have sponsorships from corporations because those universities are solving problems for those corporations. We are well positioned to do that. That is not the way we've decided to do our work right now. But what's on the table this year is us deciding to do our work. So I can sit here and say, that it's numbers $1 million, but it doesn't really mean anything. Because I hope you come up with a vision to do the work or an outcome like the battery capital of Georgia that is beyond our current resources, but is enough. There's enough value in there for us to go and garner those resources because it solves somebody else's problem too. Does that make sense? So I'm sorry, Matt. If we answer that question, all we're going to do is look there. But I did give you a lot of options in there. Frere is a good example of a company that's going to need talent and they need partnership. And they are right in our backyard. That was, I believe, a $2.1 billion investment on behalf of that company with some incentives from the state. They're looking for partners right now.
Thank you.
A pleasure. And we'll keep shedding light on that as we go through the iterative process.
we'll be able to have more definitive answers on that front. It's the right place to start. Banner capital of Georgia, that's awesome.
Other questions or comments for our administrators? Anything online? Okay, thank you so much.
Think of anything else, please reach out. Thank you.
I'm out of order. I forgot we need to do roll call. So we're gonna do, this is one of those days. I'm excited about ideas. I'm an ideas guy. And so all this talk of what we can become is exciting. So let's do roll call and then we'll get into some other items. Laura?
Jennifer Allen. Here. Heidi Banford. Jim Bellin.
Here.
Stacy Boyd.
Here online.
Jamie Brandenburg.
Here.
Laura Karamanica. Carrie Carmen.
Here.
Yun Chang.
Here.
Morris Council.
Here.
Amy Cuomo. Here. Betsy Dobbs.
Here online.
Clifford Davis.
Here.
Basu Dutt.
Here.
Kelly Dyer.
Here online.
Jennifer Edelman. Sarah Elias.
Here online.
Georgia Evans. Here. Kimberly Green. Here. Robert Griffin.
Here.
Patrick Hadley.
Here online.
John Hammond. Mike Hester. Mark James.
Here.
Suryata Pazmino.
Here.
Baruch Khan.
Here.
Anna Kojaks.
Here online.
Gavin Lee.
Here.
Sungwon Lee.
Here online.
Corey Maggiano.
Something out there for my again.
Cody Mason. Jairus Matthews.
Present online.
Tammy McClenny.
Amy Yarbrough here for Tammy McClenny online.
Dylan McClain.
Here.
Kyung-hee Moon.
Here online.
Glenn O'Leary Parker.
Here.
Brian Perry.
Here online.
Laura Phillips.
Here online.
Walter Riker.
I'm here.
John Roberts. Minna Rollins. Here. JC Sean.
Here.
Beth Shepherd. And Barker from Beth Shepherd. Huang Shin.
Here.
Jason Swift.
Favorite car on sneakers.
Scott Sykes. Julie Talbot.
Here online.
Corey Waters.
Here.
Jennifer Weber.
Here.
Jack Way.
Here.
Erica Wentz. Sarah Wofford. Lee Ye.
Here online.
Great, thank you.
Great, thank you so very much. Sorry, I was out of order on that. Okay, general information updates. The one thing I'm going to talk about here, and then we're going to talk about workload in our small group discussion breakouts. I listened a lot to our discussion last month. I've listened to people who have shared the notes from that discussion with me. I've listened to people who have subsequently talked to me. So here are a couple of things I just want to update you on. More details will come out of the Senate newsletter that follows this meeting. When it comes to Senate service and serving in leadership positions on the Senate, I want to acknowledge your noteworthy achievement. So there will be at the end of the academic year letters that will come out from me. that will identify noteworthy achievement that I am aware of, primarily through your committee chairs, or my own awareness. So I can try to demonstrate to you how much you are appreciated by this faculty senate. That'll take some work, it's okay. But really, I think one of the things that came through loud and clear that I can address, and I think our administration support, is being able to let people know how they're valued and being able to use that, if you would desire, in your own annual evaluations or P&T and PTR evaluations as a supportive evidentiary source to demonstrate that you are valued in the work you do in the Senate is something I can easily do. So that's going to happen. And more details will be coming on that. And then the other thing that came forward in our discussion to me was that people get assigned to committees. They don't always know why. The committees aren't necessarily where their interests lie. So what we're going to do is we're going to have tasks that are going to be listed and announced. They will be under committees, as those committees have certain responsibilities. But where you choose to serve, which tasks are interesting to you, you can join on the task forces that will address those issues. So if we address workload, let's say a task force is going to be formed for workload, and that's something you really want to be a part of, but you're not in an obvious committee with responsibility for that, that's not going to matter. You'll still have your home committee, but your work may be in a task force that's under the sort of supervision of another committee. So I want you to do the work you want to do, that you find meaningful and valuable. So there will be task forces announced, not forces, but tasks announced, and then task forces formed, and you can serve on whatever tasks you like. Now, if there's no one serving on a task, then it'll just be dealt with by the committee chair, I guess, the executive committee. But we will try to get at least a small group of you to work on every task that is coming along. And I imagine there will be interest in each of those. So this way you serve, yes, in a home committee, but you get to work on the things you care most about, that are most relevant to your program and your own interests. Okay. Finally, and I didn't do it this time, but I've talked with the president about this. It was mentioned in our last meeting that people would like to maybe have some food and maybe some drink when they meet, but I don't want to do that when only half of us can come together. And I realize it's fall break, a lot of you have children, you need to be away. I understand that, but I do want us to have that opportunity, and the president's totally supportive of it. So we will need to do that, but you need to be here because I don't want him ordering food for 56 or whatever people and only 22 are here. So we're going to do that either in the November, I think November meeting might make sense, or December. We'll talk and figure it out. But we will do that, and you will need to be here. Okay, so love to have you. You love this. I think it was your idea. You're like clapping. I love ideas. Okay. So those three things, okay? Letters to show your noteworthy achievement, to value your noteworthy achievement. Task forces that will focus on tasks and you can serve where you want and your interests align. And then we'll do food and drink in the upcoming meeting. We'll talk about workload in our small group discussions. So I'm going to move on. My computer needs to come back alive. Just a second. Okay, so we're going to move to our undergraduate program committee. And I think unless there is something from the floor, we're going to go ahead and vote. Remember, we're doing consent agendas now for UPC and GPC business. Oh, I should have mentioned, if you're on GPC or UPC, you need to keep serving on those committees. Okay, your task may be interesting elsewhere, but we need all our folks on board on those committees. So not making an exception, you can also serve elsewhere. But on behalf of our UPC and GPC chairs, those are heavy work committees. I need you guys to stay right there in those committees and work on. But I'll turn it over to you, Kim, for the vote. Unless there's something from the online or in-person group, a concern about any of the items on the agenda for UPC.
We received no questions in advance. So nothing for questions. Okay, there were 8 items that we're voting for as a block then. So all in favor of the items submitted by UPC approving these programs and courses. All in favor? And any opposed? Or any abstaining?
Okay, that was a historical moment. I don't know if you realize, that has never happened in the history of the a vote that fast on that many items. GPC, let's see if we can do the same. Any questions or comments from the floor, including our online folks, about any item on the GPC list of course and program modifications?
All right, so with no questions or comments that were noted, there were 4 items on the GPC agenda. If you're in favor of approving those 4 items, please let it be known by raising your hand. Thank you.
No, any objections
Oh, thank you.
and any abstentions? Okay.
Thank you, Laura.
Okay. And you had the information items there. Any questions or comments from the floor on the information items? Okay. Okay, so we're going to turn some time over to Dylan on behalf of the SAIA committee to bring a few items forward concerning the schedule.
All right, good afternoon, thank you. So after the previous Senate meeting, when we were all presented with the scheduling proposal, well, you can see our recommendations up there. I tasked my committee to gather feedback from students, in particular the Student Affairs Committee and colleagues as it relates to students. The schedule. So essentially, we met with the delegation from the Student Government Association to hear their perspective on it. And the proposals that you see on the screen are our recommendations to the faculty. In a nutshell, so I can give you the specific recommendations which were crafted prior to this meeting. So that context, I think, is important prior to last Friday. I'll also give you the spirit of the recommendations. So there's a general sense, I think, among the faculty that really big changes in something like our schedule, which really sets the rhythm of our university, need to absolutely be based and justified on as significant evidence as the changes are. And I don't think we've seen that to date. So the recommendations are, we need to see hard data, hard evidence to support the changes and to support and to justify and to point out, to highlight exactly what problems we're trying to solve. So for instance, many of the anecdotal stories that we have heard about the need for these changes have been focused on relatively narrow segments of our student body. So I think we want to make sure that we're not making changes that affect the many based on the needs of the few. We've also heard that there are gaps in our schedule that make it a challenge for students to economize their day. I think we need to know exactly how much of a problem that is. I think we need data on exactly what proportion of our student body, when they sit down and verify them, that is a specific challenge that they confront. So the spirit of our recommendations is we need to do our homework on this. So we want to investigate our student body, survey our student body. We want to build on what we've started by investigating the opinion of our faculty. And importantly, for both of those points, we need to do that in a quantitative way. We need to make certain that we can make some valid inferences about our broader population based on these samples. And our biggest suggestion is that we hit the pause button on all of this until we really have an opportunity to do our homework and then incorporate whatever we learn from our homework in a revised proposal. Again, you can see the specific recommendations, that's the background.
So the SAIA has voted on these. They are a motion on the floor, but it is now open for discussion in the General Senate. So comments, questions, responses, anything we want to put forward as discussion items. Please.
I would ask Dr. Akins if you could help contextualize, can you walk us through the process and the input that you all have received in bringing forth the information, the recommendation, the fact we sent last month, I know you and that group has done a lot of work. So can you provide to this body an update on what that has been and the input and the data that you all have in?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me here. Good afternoon. The work group to develop the first draft proposal consisted of Sonia Adams, Donna Hayden. Sonia Adams, if you do not know, does a lot of statistical work for the Office of the Provost, including utilization, including credit hours and classroom scheduling. Donna Hayden, the registrar, Jeffrey Reber, representing the Faculty Senate, Karen Owen, representing information about the core curriculum, Pauline Gagnon, Cassie Dean, talking about undergraduate education, myself, Shauna Widener, who brought considerations from the student perspective and strategic enrollment management, Whitney Brandt, who is university scheduler and holding all the information about class scheduling. We had the meetings in July and August, and already a couple of weeks earlier with a proposal to present to Faculty Senate for further review. We popularized the proposal, and it is a proposal to Provost Council, Dean's Council, Faculty Senate, as you very well know. Currently, it is in progress. We do have a survey out to faculty, all faculty, schedulers, and students. To date, we have had 5% response rate, so we are still in the progress. And I hope that you and our colleagues do go and present feedback so we can have a robust review. So this is where we are as of today. Anything else that I can clarify or mention?
I was just gonna ask, is there discussion about colleges like college education where we have those work students that go through and have field placement like with BB, something that's exempt from?
Yes, and a good example again is nursing. They first came out and said we do parts. And the schedule not work well for us. And the reaction was, of course, we don't want to have an impediment on the education of nursing. So they already know that they will have different potential in this matter.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I'll add that last month at the Faculty Senate, I mentioned nursing, and this is a structure. But as people and individual programs have different needs, we're very open to that. So I commend Dylan. I agree with the sentiment and the spirit of this motion, that we are looking at this and we shouldn't make these decisions in a vacuum, which is why we've gone through this rather lengthy process of having people to discuss. I'll also point out that there were 3 calendar options, or scheduling options, 2 of which were dismissed in favor of the one that was presented. But I think the full document, we can dive into that and some pros and cons as well. And a preliminary response of the surveys, again, it's still open, but looking at some of the results, I would like to address that in the same way that Dr. Repper provides questions, and then we can address those in this body. Some of the input is, well, 7:30, no one wants to teach or be in class at 7:30, or some of the classes are really long. I'll highlight that 7:30 is an option. This doesn't mean that we're going to require that people take classes or teach at that time. And for the meets once a week for 3 hours, pedagogically, if that doesn't work, or if you are in an art studio or in a simulation lab or a natural sciences lab that would necessitate, from a learning perspective, that we need to deviate from this, absolutely, that's available. So this isn't a one and done. And again, appreciate the work of the committee and you bringing this forward, just trying to provide some context and some more details around how we've arrived at this proposal. Thank you.
So,
just quantitatively, I mean, I know that you mentioned about Sonia Adams in the past, but with them, really think that they're very knowledgeable about numbers and who does what. I mean, Donna Hayes, an institution knows herself. So, I trust what she said. But you didn't tell us any specific numbers, like what specific patterns have they identified that gave them pause to say, okay, so this is how we should go? In a sense, what we're saying, at least I think myself, is what specific problem is it that has shown consistently as a pattern that's problematic for, say, 10% of the students, 20% of the students, 15% of the students, X% of the students, so that we have a sense of the scope of the problem, so that we can at least understand it and think, oh, I see why this is actually being done, because it's affecting X number of students. So that's the only thing I mean, in terms of background that I wanted to know. Again, I think the sentiment of you really have to be careful about not trying to solve a problem for very few students that really doesn't affect the vast majority of the students. But again, knowing the people that handle the data, I know that they're very good at them. The other issue is, you know, the midday, there's a break. And at first it seemed, I didn't really think much of it, but then I started thinking, well, if everybody has that break at noon, that is on campus, I think I'm not going to be going to East Commons. Because I've seen what's happening at East Commons when everybody rushes at the same time. So I'm wondering how that's going to play out in reality. Because if every student, every administrator, every visitor is on campus, and there's the 1 hour, I mean, it takes 5 minutes to get from place to place. You now have only 50 minutes. It takes another 5 minutes to get back, so you now only have 40 minutes. And it takes, and if there's a long line, you're going to be there waiting for a while. So that is a logistical sort of bottleneck that I thought, well, that does not seem to bode well for my visiting East Commons.
Can I address that one? We've got capacity in the campus right now for a whole bunch of things. And I appreciate the guys, we all had it off. I'd like to think that East Commons is so attractive that everybody would come back first. You see, if we had that type of demand, we would have to adapt our service model for the university. And we would. I hope we have that problem. I hope we have a problem, so many faculty and students, and I don't know what that, look at the block schedule could change and we could have all kinds of input. I also don't think, when we say what the problem is trying to solve, what is the problem that the status quo is solving? Because that is the other question we have to ask about all of our work all the time. I hope we have the type of demand that says, oh my gosh, we're gonna have to like build a new East Commons. We're gonna have a Northern Commons, right? We don't have that type of demand right now, and being scared of people wanting to be here, I hope doesn't fuel that discussion. Because I'll take responsibility for making certain that the line is not long. And we will, let's adapt. We don't have that many spaces in our university right now where people gather. Where it's structural that people gather, except in theater, right? Because if I want to be part of theater, then we'll be part of the cast, and, right? We have to create more of those places. If I have a cohort and I'm part of something already, we've got a whole bunch of students. I walked across campus with one yesterday, and I'm just teaching them about different areas of the university. And you know what happened when we were walking? There's an alum on campus just kind of wandering around. He had a meeting, but he was wandering around. He came up and gave me a hug. I've only met him once, and a year ago I was giving a speech at a fraternity's 50th anniversary celebration. He just was so excited to be part of campus because him being part of that fraternity and all of the experiences he had here was so important to him. He felt to get a hug a stranger. Part of our job is to create stuff like that. We don't create it by not having a structure that informs them. We have other universities. I use the University of Dayton as an example. They have, at least I was interviewed there for professorship 20 some years ago. They have that space. All of the students gather, all of the faculty and staff gather for lunch. Everybody. I'm sure they had to make the dining room bigger at some point to make that happen. But I do believe it is part of our responsibility as a university to create community, that creates spaces for it, and this does do something unique that other people aren't doing. Maybe Kennesaw State is scared of long lines. I hope we are embracing the opportunity to be together and find better ways to do that. I think that might be.
Did you want?
So if I'm interpreting your response correctly, so part of the rationale for the change to create your terminology placement. Yeah. Is that so? I mean, I can understand that, but I wasn't communicated in the rationale for the whole thing.
Yeah.
If you had said that, I'm like, okay, I can see that. Yeah, I can handle longer lines before we're making it a place for people to gather. I think that's the rationale that needs to be communicated, articulated clearly.
No, but I think that's also why we throw it out so that we can get to that type of thing, right? So that we can have discussion about it and we can go kind of whatever all of the first pieces and parts here that are important. Why are they important? That's the right discussion. What problem are we trying to solve? Should be asking ourselves that both about new ideas and about the existing. Right. I mean, you know, it's funny. There are a lot of things being done on this campus now that 3 years ago, most people, I think, were convinced that students couldn't possibly do that work, even though we're training them to go out and be the people who do that work. And now some of them are doing that work. We are just fine, right? So I think that input is the right one, like that guides the right discussion where we try to land.
Sal, did you get an answer on the first part, or did you have a question from?
Not the first one, the second one I
Right.
got there. So I appreciate that answer, because if you clarify for me that it seems to me that part of the rationale, and it makes sense to say, well, you know, we want to gather people in one place for everybody to interact and have fun.
Listen, I would open a wine bar on campus if it would be the right thing for people to gather. I don't know if I'm actually allowed, but it is. Yeah, but I go, that's and you know, but I actually think we could get through, USG policies change a little bit. But I said that we have to be rethinking what a university is, because it's not, you know, the student I was walking with yesterday is a commuter. He loves the university. His sister went here. She loved the university. She's a teacher now in Coweta County, right? But he's still searching for how to find his place a little bit. Oh, gosh, we gotta make that more intuitive and simplified. That's not solved by the class schedule, but maybe it's an element.
Yeah. Before we get to the two comments though, your first was about the data
Right.
that informed the
Right.
formation of the scheduling committee. Does anyone want to speak to that? Dr. Preston, maybe?
I'm happy to share the raw summary. About a year and a half ago, I did a utilization analysis. We get this from all kinds of sources, but doing a heat map analysis and the number of start times and the patterns of, you know, Monday, Thursday, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I'll say we're looking at a lot of institutions, and I know that this is maybe not an objective data point, is tremendously large in Western relative to our peer and aspirant institutions. I'm happy to share those data with you and the visualization that really articulated the problems to me. That you know, we've got a 9:01 start time because the banner system won't let us stack an end and a start time adjacent to each other. And even though computer science is my discipline, I firmly believe computers should not be telling us what to do. We should be telling them what to do. So can we not adjust our start and end times to where it's 50-minute blocks? You know, start at 8, end at 8:50, and then start at 9 and 9:50 and so on. So part of it is cleaning. And it's just foolishness to have a 9:06 start time. I don't know about you, but when I was a student, I wouldn't remember that. I might have shown up 10 minutes late or 5 minutes early. So it's a communication and a human factors piece to that. Relitza, I don't know if you've got further data on the analysis that others on the working group provided, but that was the genesis of me charging the group and saying, we really need to look at this. Because having 80+ start times in a given week is just confusing. It's that choice paralysis. And I know that you're choosing courses and maybe, but from us, having this confusion, I know TBS did this brilliantly, starting everything at 05 back in the day. If you remember watching that channel, if you lived in the Southeast and beyond. But for our students and for our faculty, having a simplified start and end time and making it just more consistent is just going to make our lives easier. And it's also micro stress that we might not even consciously recognize. But I've got 3 minutes to get here versus a bit more time. So happy to share that spreadsheet and the visualization if that provides some clarity.
And one piece of just feedback I think that would be useful for the scheduling committee is to bolster the rationale behind some of the features of the schedule, like the lunch, or well, it's really not, I think it was meant to be a lunch hour, it's meant to be an hour where everyone could gather to get that rationale bolstered in ways that people don't have to guess at it. So I think that's really valuable feedback for the scheduling work group. Lynn, go ahead, and then Amy.
I guess I wasn't aware of all the varieties of start time, so thank you for sharing that. Maybe I missed that and reading through some of the documentation there, but I just didn't. Also, kind of repeating Sal's question, like, were the students surveyed on their preferred, class start times? Because, like I have students who work multiple jobs and have family obligations, and so they're strategically assembling their schedule to be as tight as possible. That gathering hour might be a hardship for them. So I'm just would really appreciate seeing more data on kind of student opinions on this proposal.
I'll briefly clarify. That's essentially exactly what our request is, to not look back in history. And given the reality, the complex reality has noted that we have had, what is our utilization been? When are students signing up? It's to, if we are going to start from scratch and essentially create a new beginning for our schedule, let's really dive in and start from scratch by asking the students, what is it you want? What works for you? That's what we're asking for.
Thank you both for your comments, and part of the considerations came from historic data. Students will not tell us 5% or 10% of that quantity, so on that they will vote with their feet, so to say, where they go and what times they sign up. And if something is overlapping, they just cannot sign up for those courses. So it is very hard to measure exactly how many students were inconvenienced or delayed in their coursework because of the currently existing overlaps. However, throughout last year, as Provost Preston mentioned, we looked at the patterns of utilization and when courses were mostly populated, and what were the resolutions for classroom utilization? Do we have even enough classrooms to accommodate? And on that front, Whitney spoke a lot. What are the difficulties to accommodate everyone, every faculty and students who want to sign for classes, provided that classes have limitations in size, specifically for certain programs. So it's a complex matter. And it's not only the students, not only the faculty. We have 3 campuses, and we would like to have efficiency and to align everything to these campuses. Currently, those start and end times for classes are not the same on all of our campuses. We also want to attract and work with more dual enrolled students. As you may have heard, it is expected hundreds of more students will enroll on the Douglasville campus and at least 100 more on the Union campus. Those students have a high school bell schedule and a high school transportation schedule. We have to be conscientious about that and allow the opportunity to have a 7:30 class in order to accommodate multiple hundreds, several hundred of dual enrolled students. The schedule does not, proposed schedule does not say you have to have a 7:30 class, but it says there is an opportunity if we want to serve also those students who we want to attract to come and then continue their education with us. On top of that, a little cherry on the cake. And we did not know until recently it may happen, but it does, and it's a good thing. It's a good thing. But we're gonna lose 12 classrooms from PAPA when PAPA next academic year goes on to construction. So how do we accommodate all that? These are so many different pieces of the puzzle. And to respond, we did reach also to the SGA asking for input, and students are still completing the survey. We have not completed that. Again, my ask of everyone is please bring your feedback to the survey so we can have our opinions counted. Thank you.
Amy,
I just want to clarify the process, first year in Senate, I'm so sorry. So the question is to vote now, to pause this process, but we've had information, so we can't go back to our faculty, so we have to just sort of figure it out, okay?
there's three things to vote on, but yes, one of them is to pause or slow the process.
You want to tell me the other two?
The other two is to research students and research faculty more rigorously or thoroughly, quantitative and qualitative means to understand what problems this solves and what problems it might create or not. Does that sound about right?
They were taking a block, so we have to vote.
Oh, they're taking us a block? Oh, okay. So it'll be voted as one vote.
Okay, and
Thank
then just to clarify, the folks who were, the reason that, Dr. Higgins and our person would like to go forward with this is because we don't have time to pause for a year, am I correct? In understanding your arguments, I just want to give you some argument.
So this is a recommendation for scheduling and to create blocks. It doesn't prevent departments to say, we need to do something different.
Okay.
But it's an effort to minimize and the placemaking. It's not just about, food. The idea of blocking, people need to be efficient with their time, I think is random, but occasionally you can also be, right? But it's student clubs, it's the faculty committee works. The hour isn't just about, having lunch, it's about doing business collectively in all aspects. We make sure that's the idea of, pausing for a year. We've identified an issue that we do have overlap. We do have problems with this myriad of start times. Again, back to the computer system telling us what to do. So the recommendation out of the working group was give this to schedulers so that they can use this in scheduling. And fall 24 registration oddly is there's a lot of work that goes into it to get ready for students to see that catalog. So that's why we're recommending we adopt this. We move it forward. It does not prevent us from revisiting it continuously, and nor does it prevent an individual department from saying, hold on, we have a studio, we have labs, we have unique needs. We're not going to go here with this. And then the faculty and the chair and the dean and the office of the provost saying, absolutely, we get it. You've got a different dispensation you're working with.
Thank you. I think we had one online question. I'll just read it. The options for one evening per week evening courses are limited with the block schedule, 7 o'clock to 9:30. These are often the meeting times for graduate students in certain programs. Have there been considerations for safety as well as the commute in the evening for students and faculty?
I'm going to go to my very colorful spreadsheet. And we've got certain classes that go all the way up to 10:15 currently. It's not many, but at as late as 8:15, 8:30, we've got upwards of 6 courses running on campus currently. So from a campus safety perspective, all of those elements currently exist. We've got Live Safe, we've got other elements that are in place for students to make sure, and faculty to make sure that they are taken care of, and we've got a safe campus environment.
Any follow-up from you, Jairus, about that?
No.
Okay. Please.
So I hear on the dual enrollment, the idea of having a schedule that feels like incisive, but it's not a conversation right now, but can we consider our calendar to better align UWG's breaks with the school district. Like this week, a lot of parents, kids who are off. I know I haven't seen my students in a couple of weeks. And all the breaks. And, you know, it kind of seems like if we were willing to move back for a week and they were willing to, you know, we could come together. So
That's a great point, and for those online who might picked up, the calendar itself, not just looking at the hours and when classes. We do have that calendar committee, and your point is well made that can we align that as much as possible to local school calendars to make families' lives and travel and other things. Absolutely, taking that on, and we'll visit those. Thank you for that suggestion.
Now, that would be a historical event. I think since they started in 2000, they've never aligned. Yeah, I've never seen those aligned.
And we have to adapt. I mean, school districts, we don't control. I know this is not, you said it's not time for the conversation, but I will throw out this informal survey. I am curious how many takers there would be. We ran like a fall break during the school district times just to accommodate employees. Because I mean, you see a lot of kids. I interview every kid that I see on campus who's an employee's child to you know, test their knowledge on the Wine Friday trivia, because they're here because there's no option for their parents, right? You know, that's part of working at a university. That is a problem that I don't know, maybe we need to talk to the superintendents, see what we can.
yeah, I don't know the rationale for why our fall break is in spring break.
Yeah.
If we could move and talk to our district partners and get strong partnerships with.
We'll bring that up.
Absolutely. We have a party contact requirement for credit hours, but beyond that, there's a lot of flexibility in our calendar. Understand that we publish it years in advance so people can plan, but your point is very well made. And anytime you see an issue where we can change and be better aligned to make people's lives better, always open for that. Thank you. You've given me homework. Appreciate it.
This is why we need spaces we create for discussion and sharing this kind of energy of ideas. Very helpful.
We'll talk to the superintendent. I don't know the answer to this question. I'm really intrigued because it's been, my kids are all out of that space now, but I'm hoping we're going to have something back in the November meeting that at least gives us some insight into the oracle of the school districts and how they think they can.
The districts aren't all.
No, they're not.
They've worked on that, though. I think they did pull it off this year. I think their fall breaks along Carroll County and Carroll, I believe.
I think no, that is correct.
But well,
No, we got arrows. Those are the other ones.
yeah, it gets quirky there.
Yeah, for Carroll County, Crown Suffolk, we got a lot of people. Yeah, it's the surrounding counties.
Yeah, good point.
But we'll talk to Coweta.
Some of the people, instead of local for everybody. There for some.
That and daylight savings time. We'll work with Congress. We'll get this figured out. Any last comments or questions before we, now the vote would be for a recommendation to go to the administration for those three elements. They're not on the board now, but for those three elements, the pause, the research on faculty, the research on student. That would be the vote that's on the floor from the SAI.
I just have one more question. If we're dealing with such different student constituencies as we're growing in our graduate students, acknowledging a lot of them are online. We have dual enrolled and then sort of, I don't know, quasi-traditional, which encompasses a lot of people. I mean, I really am, you would think some of those preferences for class start times would be different between those constituencies, and certainly maybe that would help address the dual enroll. I don't think there's any question that we don't want times to serve those dual enrolled students and give them enough time to get bused back to their home location. I mean, I'm force, you know, so it's just trying to really understand student behavior and student needs. And I just, for the first time in my whole time at UWG, saw your expectations, communications expectations document this week, Dr. Cowley. So it really illuminated, and your keystone is we do things in the interest of the students, and then UWG makes it work. I'm so glad to see that document. It explains a lot. But I just wish that, I don't know if this just needs to be a little bit more data informed, or if there is satisfaction with the data that's available, and of course, you're still gathering input. So we're not voting on that to act that, we're still in process.
Correct. To remind everyone, the survey closes at end of business next Friday, October 20th. And just to reiterate, as of today, we are at 5% response rate. I hope to get a little bit more higher response rate.
And just to note, in terms of outcome, regardless of the vote outcome and the then administrative response, the interested committees or task forces that we could form to conduct this kind of research can still be presented to the administration anytime in the process to make the case for some amendments to the schedule. So these, I think sometimes we get a little linear in our temporal thinking. You know, it's like the future is always amendable in the present. So we can make recommendations to the administration anytime on this, and they can consider implementing. Is that correct from your perspective?
Yeah.
Good question.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Just one quick question, is the scheduling committee going to be kind of observing next year or actual, I mean, when it comes to that, especially people may don't know much about time, because what kind of problem should there be? So if the scheduling committee is there, then we can start it.
We will meet after the survey first to see the response rate. And until we have a better understanding and implementation and results, that committee will have to remain active, and the composition may continue to evolve with people who are knowledgeable about the questions that are being asked.
I heard some concerns that the survey is collecting email addresses, and that may be why the response rate is low. It's not clear that it's anonymous or not. The survey.
It is confidential. It is done by IEA. And the email addresses I understand to be collected to be responsible for one person, one answer. Otherwise, if it is anonymous, there is no accountability of who responds how many times. Again, it's confidential. Personally, I did not see any email, and I received the analysis and as a composite analysis. That's what I'm going to see, not by person. And that will be brought to the committee. So Dr. Redberg and all people on the committee will see the same.
Yeah, I guess I just want to be sure, and we're going to vote on this. If we're going to vote to pause something, what is the current target? Is there a certain date that you're hoping to have this? Because if it's tomorrow, I can understand that we would pause for another pause, but if it's something that you're going to have in January, then maybe that isn't enough time. So I want to be sure about what I'm voting.
Yeah, schedule building begins, it's November.
December usually.
Yes.
Yes. And
So we've got a month-ish before we're building schedule.
And just to be clear, we're not voting to pause. We're voting to make a recommendation on that to the administration. So we don't get to vote to pause anything. We vote to make a Senate recommendation to that effect.
I'm just curious.
Yeah.
The exact timelines.
We're looking at 4 to 6 weeks where schedule building.
Yeah.
I have a question. Was the survey sent to all students or just
Yeah.
select students?
Select from the governing organization. And we can always expand on that. This is not a limitation. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions before we put it to a vote?
Yeah, could I?
Please.
Yeah, I think the sentiment, there's enough sentiment for us to expand on that since we have time. I would suggest that let's just do that.
Okay.
Because that's going to be a question.
Okay.
Okay. So we'll put it to a vote and go from there.
All in favor of these recommendations? Yeah. All opposed? Any abstains?
This will take a little copy.
Yeah,
of it.
we need to go on a
Laura,
roll call.
we're gonna let Laura work on that a little bit. And it is a majority of the quorum present?
It's a majority of the voting members that does.
Okay, if you approved in person, can you raise your hand one more time? And then try to get everybody.
This is in support of just the recommendation.
Recommendation, yes, recommendations. To support the SAIA recommendations, which were posted in the addendum. You needed hands for
One more time.
approve the recommendation, the vote to approve the recommendations. At the Senate level,
Okay.
and then to oppose the recommendations at the Senate level. And then, did you get that? And then abstain. Okay, we'll let you calculate that and we'll report that in a little bit. Okay, so with the remaining time, I want to turn our attention to, and thank you, by the way, and thank you, administration, for, I keep calling them administration. Thank you, Dr. Kelly and Preston, for your input. So with the remaining time, one of the things that came forward in our last discussion that was pretty obvious was people felt stretched thin. And they felt a little concerned about a workload expectation that has been kind of floating around of 80, 10, 10, 80% teaching, 10% service, and 10% research. Before we break into small groups to discuss not so much that document or that proposal or that idea, but to actually discuss what we think is a reasonable way to do workload at the university. I'm not interested in dealing with proposals that none of us have had to approve yet, right? There's not been anything put forward. So I'm more interested in what the Senate thinks as a collective would be a good way to approach workload and how we might address and measure that. So I'm just gonna do one thing real quick on this, okay? One thing and then we'll get into groups. So here's teaching, service, and research I'm gonna put together because of the way the handbook talks about it. And I gave you these documents in the addendum so you have some background. And if we put it on a year, then that 80%, 10%, and 10% gets kind of broken down that way. But if you think about the semester, right? There's like a little bit of a math issue here. In the semester, we teach what? We have 4 3-credit courses per semester. And if we agree that 10% is a reasonable way to think of a course, which I think given summer and other things, we could say that. The semester is 40%. That's where you get the 80 by multiplying it by 2, right? What's this? What's this? What's this? In a semester? 5. No. If you borrow from this, yes. But if you just look at the handbook, right? 40% of your time in a semester is teaching. What's the other percentage? Where are my math students? Now, this could also include doing more with teaching. It's not limited. At a minimum, you need to have this. If you look at that merit pay document, it talks that way too. So here's the problem. You don't see the problem with the math? All this equals, whoops. This is why you feel tripped out. The way this has been kind of thought through, at least in my experience of having a lot of discussions about this, and the FTC looked at this, is that when you use a semester-based document, the faculty handbook, and you annualize it in this way, you got to annualize the whole day thing. And the whole day thing leads to a 200% annual expectation of our workload. Am I off? Did everyone see that? Is my math wrong? So when people get resistant to the 80-10 document, I get it. So we either need to agree that our workload is a 200% expectation, or we need to manage it in a 100% expectation, which works better in this kind of a system, or we just assume it's still 40%, 60% over the year. It's kind of, I need someone who's really good at math, kind of magic math to make that happen. What's that? Proof?
Yes, this came up in the faculty development committee. And I turned to Dr. Christie, an economist, and said, can you make this work? And she said, precisely, this is the problem which you are pointing out.
Yeah. Yeah, and as my perfectionist son, when he was in first grade, would come home and say, I got 100%, he'd be frowning. Because the teacher said you could get 130% on this test. I don't like this. I didn't like it for him, I don't like it for us, you know, so let's, at least if we're going to work on workload in these small group discussions, let's agree on what percentage and time period you're talking about. So the handbook is semester based and it works to 100% in this form. That makes sense to me. If we go annual just by multiplying, then we're talking about 200%, which that'd be an interesting discussion to have. So I want to put that in place first as a potential barrier that I think we can resolve. And now I want to break us into small groups and have you start to talk about ideas for how we can manage workload. And I want us to think not just about today, I want us to think about workload in the future, what it means to be a faculty person here at this university, the workload that we need to manage, what that entails, what that includes, might need adjustment all around, right? Got to think, and of course, student success built into this too. So when we sit in small groups, I hope you'll discuss the workload documents, beginning with the faculty handbook statement, and build out what you think is a reasonable approach to workload, or at least good guiding principles for workload for this university going forward. Because right now, I think we're just all confused. And I think my understanding is some departments have even told me that the 80-10-10 is being, looked at or used or talked about. And I want to be sure we get ahead of all that and have a good, reasonable, agreed upon mathematical reality and workload, that is reasonable for us to manage. So, a couple general questions before we break.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because it relates to the cover letter, and I think the cover letter is still being under the reviewing committee.
Cover letter? What do you mean by cover letter? Annual review. Yeah.
Cover letter. And one of the challenges that I see with that, I don't think value for scale or anything like that, but it's the weighting. I mean, we should be weighted that wherever our emphasis is, that teaching, or if we have a more customized workload agreement, it will have to have percentages attached to get the correct representation of our.
You mean the overall?
Yes. Yes.
I completely agree. That's an excellent point. And if 80% of your workload is teaching and you get a 5 in it, and 10% is in scholarship, and you get a 1 in that, it shouldn't just be a 1 + 5, 6 divided by 2, right? You shouldn't land a 3. You should get like a 4.9.
Although I think 1 is a bad number.
I agree. If I can also add to this conversation, and I'm looking at this in my mental model it's an annual, right? Which I think might solve some of it, but I'll also toss out, and it might further the math. Let's also then map that to a week. Meaning if 80% of my time is dedicated to teaching, I should not be asked to do 20 hours of service or scholarship. It should scale down. And so if we find, and I've had conversations with deans about this, if it's truly a 10% of your workload is in service, you should not be doing more than about 4 hours a week. I know it fluctuates from time to time, but let's be humane. Let's not do the math so that someone is expected to work 60+ hours to accomplish what's being asked of them. And I'll couple that with a conversation that I've had with the deans, and I hope that everyone has heard from them. That if you are on a 4-4 teaching load, as the handbook's default is, you should be able to progress in your annual evaluations, in your pre-tenure, in your tenure and promotion, and your post-tenure with success. That the expectations of scholarship and service should not be such that it's impossible for someone to teach what the handbook is defaulting to and not be successful. That doesn't mean that you can't be on a 3-3 or a 1-1 or a 1-3. I mean, there's flexibility there. But we should, as an institution, set our P&T and our pre-tenure and our post-tenure review expectations that allow for what the handbook is saying. So we should value teaching. We should reward with promotion and with tenure and and other annual evaluation measures for people that are on various workloads. Because I think there's a disconnect, or there has been, that you can't be tenured unless you're doing like 40% of your time in scholarship. That's in direct contradiction to what our handbook says is what people should do or can be doing. Yes.
Yeah, and I think, and I've heard you mention this too with the different teaching loads. What I think this does is it allows this to then be really worked out in relation to this. You might want to put more into teaching, or if you get reassigned time for a particular reason, you might put more into, so what I think we may consider, and again, I want to break into small groups, so I don't want to take all the time in a large group discussion, because I think you have great ideas. But we might consider the need for really, bespoke workloads, like everyone is going to need to articulate to their department chair what their workload is going to be in a given year. Using not too spooky math, but trying to use some reasonable math about what your percentages are going to be, which has always been the way we've done it at West Georgia, by the way. You were supposed to sit with your chair and say, okay, this coming year, I'm going to be doing some, this percentage, and that percentage. So if we can get, some way of tailoring your workload that is explicit and known to your supervisor and can be then followed up on in your annual evaluation, P&T, and so on, and examined and then refined for the next year. That I think is going to be our best outcome, but I'm a little biased, so I want to break into small groups on that. So if you would, we'll go for maybe 20 minutes. We've already done some group talking here. 20 minutes. Do you have the small breakout groups online? 20 minutes to talk about how we can design from the perspective of faculty, considering our many responsibilities, how we can design an approach to workload that will work for us.
Take a minute here, very briefly.
Very briefly.
Very briefly. Okay. This came up in the faculty development committee. The faculty handbook has a section on merit pay.
Yes.
Where service and professional growth and development are to be at least a minimum of 10%. That is point one. Second, we do have in the faculty handbook workload. I don't know if they use the word workload or not, but we are supposed to have 4 3-hour courses or equivalent.
Yep.
The third point that I would try to make is I actually look back at documents from 20 years ago when I was department chair, when we were the College of Arts and Sciences, and it was not uncommon to have a workload which was 50% teaching, 40% professional growth and development, and 10% service.
Sure, thank you. So let's break it into groups. You can do this side here. We're going to split the middle here, that there, and then this group over here. Okay. So that'll make 4 groups or so. And please have someone again take notes, because I want to collect notes afterwards so I can think through this more and have this full discussion as possible. You might have to move your chairs around. You might have to move your body. You don't have to represent this. Yeah.
How you feeling today? You missed last time. You still overcoming? I'm so sorry.
What's that?
Good. I'm glad you're back. I hope you can feel better and better. Any lingering symptoms other than fatigue and sorry. Well, glad you're back.
I always want to chat. Yes, so if someone's abstaining, they're essentially not present. So we have one more than any place. So the motion would pass.
Well, I think.
It's I'm just going to.
And also in the program.
Give me an example.
So you teach them
And then that's one thing. Well, okay, so we had, okay, so we didn't have anyone objecting online. So in total, we had 12 plus the 18, is that correct? 12 plus 6 in person, so we had 18 total of in favor. Then can we go back to the yes, so
Yeah.
the rule is, oh, sorry, not passive by one, this might be passed by 6. There weren't any, 5.
So that means it's clearly.
And that sounds about right. So it just passes. That's the thing with the majority voting, which is technically in the rule, technically Roberts, to my knowledge, there's no real process for abstention, it's just for not voting. So you can either vote to approve, vote aye, or vote nay. Technically, that's all you do. And it's the majority of the people who actually vote on a motion. So that's clear. Are you feeling kind of better?
I'm good.
I'd hear it.
Did they get formed okay, the groups online?
The recommendation.
It did pass, okay, all right, we'll put it forward, and they can do it, it will.
Yeah. Yeah. Like when we did. Yeah.
Some people I see.
And then when that was working, they don't say. Yeah. But I think a lot of people realize that the annual.
Yes, so you have water and $3 for support. But of course, we have. But then Kevin. Discusses with us. If we percentage change. So I have to be on the same. Yeah. And according to the conversation just having, they want. Where someone is going to be doing massive service. So they don't want us to have these sort of handcuffs on either side. Or we don't teach class. So that's where we get to start thinking. How do I figure out what's the day?
Yeah, so.
Yeah, with. Also.
Because the handbook can say. Your clean range, you're teaching. Some percentage of the range.
We have a number of. It's like.
So, and I was looking at there, but you parents, and right now, the parent big statements, what you're missing, teaching you how to remember that. That's-
So, I think that one of our audience things that we want is that it's-
Need to have a quick policy.
So they need to handle these two now that it's very much proposed.
And doesn't have, it's not that we have considered the grade.
Right, but there needs to be. that change.
We can just leave it as it is. We can leave it as.
Okay, so that was proposed as a change.
Yeah. Just the almost reasoning around. So I think you didn't, you know, I didn't see it. We don't have any obligation. We have a working child. They can be good times.
So it's not confusing. Really, it's just.
There is just the fact.
And the
You know. I mean, yeah, like usually. So we have. So that, that's like a lot I can, so I'm actually. And my, chair, some of us. That's still towards the growth between the proposed. And the minimum requirement. By the way, I don't know. Specific. So easy to get. Yeah, exactly. I feel like, what I did, because it's not for if you're not going to age of the year, I would aim for the rest of it. One day, eight minutes. How hard is it going to get? The years I'm saying, I think better. Yeah. That's not my. That's unless it's dramatic. What is based on our. Right now. Anyways, different than
Yeah, right. That's all you have to go to me.
We're being honest, like, yeah. Expectations are all here.
Always, always.
Language and barriers with students. That allows. No, it's not, it's not.
And I don't mind.
You got. Kind of depends on how. Evaluation. That's right.
Yeah. I think that allows. Yeah.
This present statements, there's a fundamental disagreement said, which is considered how the calculation is designed. Calculation is what the president's talking is not understanding those things. That is the first thing. That's the first thing we discussed. Yeah. You could do something as I just scheduled. We can count contact our schedule. But unless that is written policy as an alternative method for evaluating. If that's something I'll say that at least my conversation with the girls he specifically use that to burn down the verb. At least our dean has used that as reason. So that's That's definitely.
Credit hours, basic line, I think.
And whereas in some of these like art, music, chemistry, and sciences, all of our students to get their accredited degrees, they have to do independent research. Those credit hours that they sign up for, those are not part of your credit hours. Even if we're doing credit hour totals, we have a teaching or a 4 hours a week that account for credit hour, and that's not part of it. So one of the issues with credit hour counting is it doesn't count independent study or faculty directed research for faculty directed projects. Which is part of also a larger problem of credit hours not capturing the total amount of teaching hours spent directly with students.
That from it works. We're trying to align with our.
Yeah. So if your business might come up in, I can imagine come up in a circumstance where you student internship, but they have to have a supervisor.
Yeah.
And you're spending a certain amount of supervising the students.
Yes.
That's the.
And we just have to make sure I can't do that, because I think it's very important.
Well, and thank you for taking the time.
Well, I mean,
We have some input from groups or? Okay. So just do that when we do the whole thing. Okay. Okay, everybody. Oh, shoot. Come back together with me here for a moment. Thank you to almost every group pointing out that my math was fuzzy. I tried to erase it. It won't quite erase. Now dry erase board work. The point was to get a point across, not to do the best math. So I will admit to that failure. Okay, so I kind of moved around and heard from groups, but I didn't get to hear from our online groups. Is there anyone who would be willing to speak from the online chat groups about some of the things that you've been looking at, we've talked about?
I don't mind speaking from my group.
Thank you, please.
So I was in group 2, and I think most of us kind of decided on the fact that we feel like it should be up to either our department or somewhere along those lines, because some of us do so many different styles of how we meet that. Depending on if we're working in overload, if we're not, if we're lecturers, professors, all of those kind of things. And so that's kind of where we were, is that we feel like that division should be discussed, like with how we do our goals each year with our chair, and then what is set on there is fair to that 80-10 split, or however your split is.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. And I heard that in some of the groups here in person, a similar sentiment to the need for customizing this with your supervisor around maybe some guidelines or principles, but not being held fast to a certain set percentage. Was there another online group that someone could speak on behalf of? I think there were 2. Yeah. Someone from the other group? Jump on in.
Oh, and Dylan, your action item passed.
What was that?
If the last vote.
Oh, it passed, okay. So that vote on the resolution, on the recommendations from the SAIA passed, just want to make sure everyone knows that. So we'll follow up and work with the administration to see how that gets managed in response. Okay, so a couple things that I think we need to consider. One is the existing faculty handbook policy is the only policy. So that other document and that 80-10-10 kind of metric that's out there is not approved and has not gone through process. So if you have a supervisor who's using it, it may be they're using it because they want to, or as a guide, but it's not official policy. Okay, so that's one important thing that I want to make sure everyone knows. The second is our handbook might not be, in its being a little aged, it might not be suited to our current circumstances. It might need some revision, and we might want to consider whether the percentage approach is even reasonable, or whether we need to look at ranges of percentages. I know you're going to talk about that a little bit. How do we want to, as a Senate, think about our faculty handbook policy and its need for revision? That would suggest a task and a task force. And then people who are interested in that question may be coming together and working on that. So it would probably fall under the faculty development committee and maybe rules because of that handbook piece. But the actual task, we would want to have a task force leader or co-leaders, and we want to have members and have that be worked on this academic year. So I'll probably put that forward as a task in the newsletter and ask for people to join who want to be a part of that. Does that sound reasonable to folks, or is there anything I'm missing or anything? I do want to get your notes and other things to keep chewing on this, but I think at the very least, we need to say as a group, there is no 80-10-10 policy. And then secondarily, we do need to come up with a reasonable workload policy that we can all manage. And right now, I don't think we're able to manage what's in place.
A quick comment, Jeff. It came up in our little group, and then it did come up in the FDC last year, that the definition of workload is essentially a very local one. And it would be nice to have some kind of a survey, because theater, for example, is vastly different from business, is vastly different from the College of Education.
Yeah.
And so it would be nice if there were a compilation. The second complicating factor, even as I ask for that, is that my workload has changed with time as I have progressed from assistant to associate before.
Sure.
And one has to factor that timeline as well.
Oh,
So if my request to you would be, I'm part of the FAC this year, which Amy is chairing, that can we have a survey where we get a broad idea as to what the different existing models are?
yeah, I appreciate that. And that will be something I would ask the task force to consider. Not Amy, because Amy oversees that work and your committee can be part of that if people want to join that task force. But I think surveying people and getting a sense of those differences that exist, because I just heard about them in our small group discussion, that different departments have different expectations, or even colleges have different expectations around these percentages. I think that would be very useful, very helpful. But I'll leave it to the task force to decide how they want to approach gathering information, if that's okay. Let me just say this too. I was just chatting with the provost and president before they had to leave, and they apologized for not being able to join the discussion this time. But they are not beholden to any of the things that exist. They want flexibility, from what I understand. The president even mentioned maybe someone's got a big project in scholarship a particular semester, and they don't teach that semester. They focus on that, and then the next semester, of course, build back in teaching. So they, I think, want to allow for that flexibility and that tailoring of workload to a person, and not just annually. The provost even said, let's say you find out something in December that you're going to be doing the next, maybe we even can change your sort of percentages and goals for spring. I know you mentioned workload changing. My workload as faculty senate chair has changed drastically from just the last few weeks when I was asked to be on 2 steering committees, So, I mean, it is always in flux and always needs to be examined and addressed in some way. Now, we can't spend our entire year just meeting with our supervisors every day changing our workload. We have to have something, but I do think we need to be a little more nimble in how we treat workloads so we could adapt it and flex it to the needs of each faculty. That's me though. It'll be for the task force to decide what recommendations make the most sense. But
I'm so sorry to comment on it, but it just actually doesn't seem almost conceivable to provide that much flexibility away from teaching with the current workloads we have. I mean, it seems like there's in place mechanisms to get course releases for serving as program coordinator or certain defined things. But I'm just perceiving that maybe there's a greater idea that we can have more flexibility to spend 100% of our time trying to write a book for a semester when in fact that's not possible with
the current conditions. Yeah, and I think this document, if you did a policy revision, it would be for now, but it would also be what we aspire towards. And I know that's how they think, that they would hope we could have a situation on campus where people had that ability to focus on research for a semester that way. But I don't know. I don't, that's for the, if there's a willingness for a task force to work on this, then that will be for them to examine and work through. I know there's a willingness for the administration to work with us on it. So it seems like, why not? And I feel like we need it. I just think people are spread very, very thin. Especially by service now that we have fewer faculty than ever before. So I'm not, this isn't a vote item, but am I okay to move forward on a task force? Would that be okay for folks? Would there be an interest in that from some folks? Okay. As long as I see one hand, then I'm like, okay, we'll have a task force with at least one person. What's that? Yeah, thank you for your service as now task force leader and task force leader. I'll get you a letter at the end of the year. Okay, so I do need to adjourn for time. Thank you, everybody, so much. I do think we'll aim for our next meeting to be the one where we'll have some food, and maybe do that more regularly, but at least the president will help provide some food for us. So do try to come to that one in person so we can enjoy some community and eating together. And I will, Laura, unless there's other business, anything else, I will close the meeting. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Yeah, thank you.